The conference hotel in Chicago was everything Dr. Alina Ramirez had come to expect from these mandatory surgical summits: overpriced, oversold, and crawling with ambitious attendings who treated every coffee break like a job interview. Alina, 34, was a pediatric neurosurgeon at Boston Children's, widely published, frequently invited to speak, and quietly furious that her department now required visibility hours at these events or her promotion packet would stall. She had flown in from a 36-hour call shift, survived on airplane coffee, and just wanted 8 hours of unconsciousness before the keynote at 7 a.m. She dragged her suitcase into room 1422, dropped it, and noticed the connecting door closed. Good, someone on the other side. But at least there was a door. She showered, pulled on an old Harvard t-shirt, and was brushing her teeth when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, like someone used to being obeyed. She opened the connecting door, a cautious 6 inches. A woman stood there, early 30s, white freckles across the bridge of her nose, auburn hair twisted into a messy knot that looked both accidental and expensive, scrubs top under a blazer, green eyes currently narrowed in exhausted rage. "Hi," the woman said without smiling. "Dr. Rowan Callahan, pediatric cardiothoracic. Seattle Children's. Our air conditioning units are linked and both dead. Front desk says the whole wing is down. Repairs tomorrow earliest. Hotel is sold out, and they want us to leave the door open for airflow." She said the last word like it had personally offended her. "I'm willing to bribe you with literally anything if you agree." Alina opened the door the rest of the way. "Dr. Alina Ramirez, neurosurgery, Boston." I was about to melt into the carpet anyway. "Door stays open." Rowan exhaled through her nose. "Thank you. Also," I snore, like, impressively, "bring earplugs or file a noise complaint. Your call." "Noted," Alina said, already liking the complete absence of corporate politeness. Rowan started to retreat, then paused. "I wasn't kidding about the bribe. I have bourbon older than most residents." "Keep it for night 2, Alina said. "We'll probably need it." That first night was brutal. The rooms hovered at 84 degrees. Alina lay on top of the covers in a sports bra and boxers, ceiling fans spinning uselessly, listening to Rowan toss and turn on the other side of the open doorway. At 2:17 a.m. she heard Rowan get up, pad to her bathroom, run the shower cold, and just stand under it for 20 minutes. The sound of water against tile was the most soothing thing Alina had heard all day. At 3:05, A.M. Rowan appeared in the doorway wearing an oversized U t-shirt, hair dripping. "There's a 24-hour Walgreens 8 blocks away. I'm buying every bag of ice they have and possibly committing petty theft if they try to stop me. Come or don't." "I'm coming," Alina said, already pulling on shorts. Misery loves company, and I'm excellent company when homicidal. They walked through the strange quiet of downtown Chicago at 3 in the morning, neon signs flickering over empty sidewalks. Rowan carried the righteous fury of the chronically sleep. Alina matched it stride for stride. "I hate these conferences," Rowan said suddenly. "I hate pretending I'm here to foster interinstitutional collaboration, when really I'm here because my chair counts, my badge scans." "Same," Alina said. "I operate on infants with tumors, the size of lemons, and then fly across the country, so I can smile at people who introduce themselves by their index." Rowan barked a laugh that echoed off a shuttered storefront. "God, yes, and everyone asks where I trained like it's a personality. Or they ask if I'm sure I want to do pes neuro when I could make real money in spines," Alina added. Rowan stopped walking and looked at her. "Who the fuck says that to you? Every male attending over 50. Sometimes under." Rowan shook her head and started walking again. "I became a heart surgeon because my little brother was born with hyperplastic left heart and didn't make it past his Glen. I was 12. I thought if I learned how hearts actually work, I could fix the next kid." Alina was quiet for half a block. "My mom had an aneurysm rupture when I was 17. I was the one who found her. By the time I got to med school, I already knew more about Circle of Willis's anatomy than most PGY to South. I just needed to be the one holding the clip applier instead of the one waiting in the family room." Rowan looked over, expression unreadable in the streetlight. "We're not supposed to say that stuff out loud at these things." "I know," Alina said. "We're supposed to talk about grant funding and multi-center trials." They reached the Walgreens, glowing like a beacon. They bought 8 bags of ice, 3 gallons of water, 2 family-sized bags of Takis because Rowan insisted spicy helped you ignore temperature, and a 6-pack of Mexican Coke because Alina claimed real sugar was medicinal. On the walk back, Rowan said, "Thanks for coming. I was 90% sure I'd get mugged and have to perform my own trauma surgery on a sidewalk." "Happy to serve as human shield," Alina said. "Also, I stole a frozen pizza when the cashier wasn't looking." Rowan grinned for the first time all night, sharp and surprised, like she hadn't expected her face to remember how, back at the hotel, they filled both bathtubs with ice water and took turns sitting in them, passing the bourbon back and forth through the open doorway. The cold was shocking and perfect. Somewhere around 4:30 a.m., Rowan fell asleep sitting up against the bathroom doorframe, head tipped back, mouth open, snoring like a chainsaw with asthma. Alina watched her for a long moment. then dragged a spare blanket over and tucked it around Rowan's shoulders. She left the bourbon within reach. She fell asleep to the sound of that ridiculous snoring and, for the first time in days, didn't dream of bleeding brains or promotion committees. Day 2. The AC was still dead. They attended sessions separately, neurosurgery in the morning, cardiac in the afternoon, but found each other at lunch without planning it. They claimed a table in the corner and demolished plates of conference chicken while dissecting the morning's keynote with gleeful savagery. Evening found them on the hotel rooftop because Rowan had bribed a housekeeper with $20 and the rest of the bourbon for roof access. The Chicago skyline glittered below them. The air was warm but moving. They sat on the ledge, feet dangling 15 stories above the street, sharing a bag of talkies and a silence that didn't feel awkward. "I used to think if I just worked hard enough," Rowan said quietly, "I could outrun the fact that I didn't save him." My brother, Elena, picked at the label on her Coke bottle. "I still check my mom's pupils every time I visit, 20 years later. Like if they're unequal, I can still fix it." Rowan leaned over and bumped Elena's shoulder with her own. "We're very healthy people." "The healthiest," Elena agreed. On night 3, the repair guy finally showed up at 11 p.m., fixed the units in 20 minutes, and left. Cold air poured from the vents like absolution. They stood in the doorway between rooms, suddenly awkward now that they didn't have to share oxygen. "Well," Rowan said, "crisis averted." "Tragic," Elena answered. "I was getting used to your snoring." "It's distinctive," Rowan laughed. "Soft this time. Come to Seattle next year. I'll show you actual coffee. And a city that doesn't smell like conference. Carpet only if you come to Boston, and let me take you to the harbor at night, when the medical students aren't around to recognize us." "DL," Rowan said, and held out her hand like they were closing a business merger instead of whatever this was. Elena took it. Didn't let go right away. The conference dragged on for 3 more days. They attended different sessions, gave different talks, collected different compliments from people who wanted something from them. But every lunch they found the same corner table. Every evening one of them appeared in the other's doorway with takeout, or a stolen bottle of wine, or just a quiet offer of company. On the last night, the hotel threw a closing gala neither of them bothered to attend. Instead, they ordered po' boys from room service, sat cross-legged on Rowan's bed in pajama shorts and hospital t-shirts, and watched the worst medical drama Netflix had to offer while providing live commentary that would have gotten them both fired. At 2 a.m. Rowan muted the TV. The silence stretched. "Not empty." "So," she said. "So," Elena echoed. Rowan reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Elena's ear, fingers lingering. "I live on the West Coast." "I've heard it's nice," Elena said, voice rough. "I could probably get a visiting professorship. Or just visit." Rowan's smile was small and crooked and real. "I have a spare room, and excellent noise-canceling headphones if the snoring becomes a deal-breaker." Elena leaned in until their foreheads touched. "I've slept through artillery. I think I'll manage." The kiss was slow, deliberate, like 2 surgeons finally allowing themselves a steady hand after days of operating in a burning building. When they pulled apart, Rowan rested her forehead against Elena's next conference. She whispered, "We're getting separate rooms with working AC." "Absolutely," Elena said. "And then we're leaving both doors open on purpose." They fell asleep tangled together under hotel sheets that finally smelled like detergent instead of desperation. The soft hum of functioning air conditioning drowning out everything except the quiet certainty that some things, broken systems, overbooked hotels, and all, sometimes conspired to put you exactly where you needed to be. The keynote on AI-driven diagnostics had just ended when Sophia slipped into the empty row beside Elena. The auditorium lights were still dim, the applause dying out like a flatlining monitor. "I got the offer," Sophia whispered, leaning close enough that Elena could smell the faint cedar of her perfume cutting through the conference center air. Elena's pulse stuttered. "Tell me outside." They found a quiet corridor lined with posters no one was reading. "Chief of Pediatric Cardiac Innovation at UCSF," Sophia said, the words rushing out like she'd been holding her breath for days. "They want me to build the program from the ground up. Gene-editing trials, 3D printed valves, the whole moonshot package. It's everything." Elena felt pride flare bright and immediate, and right behind it, something colder. "That's extraordinary. Soph, you should be screaming this from rooftops." "I know." Sophia rubbed the back of her neck, a nervous tick Elena had catalogued years ago in med school libraries. "But it means leaving Boston, leaving the lab I bled for, leaving people. The word hung between them like an unopened suture kit. "Are you going to take it?" Elena asked. "I keep thinking yes, then no, then yes again. Help me think." So they walked the convention center's endless carpeted loops, while Sophia listed pros and cons the way she once recited cardiac cycles, perfusion strategies, grant money, Pacific fog, the loneliness of being the only Latina in most rooms out west. Elena listened, nodding in all the right places, offering counterpoints when asked, but mostly letting Sophia talk herself into the shape of the decision. That night, back at the hotel in downtown Chicago, November wind rattling the windows, Sophia knocked on the interior door between their rooms. "I'm wired," she said when Elena opened it. My brain is doing ventricular tachycardia about this job. Come in. They sat on Elena's bed in the half-dark city lights striping the walls. Sophia talked until her voice frayed about imposter syndrome that still woke her at 3 a.m., about her mother's pride and simultaneous fear that the mainland would swallow her daughter whole, about whether ambition was allowed to feel this terrifying. Eventually words ran out. Sophia's head drooped against the headboard. You can stay, Elena said quietly. Bed's big enough for 2 colleagues who can't sleep. Sophia gave a tired laugh. Colleagues, right. They lay on top of the covers, a careful 12 inches apart, shoes kicked off, still in conference clothes. The space between them felt electrically charged and impossibly fragile. They spoke in low voices about things they never said in daylight. Elena's divorce 2 years ago that still felt like an open chest wound. Sophia's fear that every milestone only proved how alone she was at the top of them. At some point, Elena woke to find Sophia had shifted in sleep. Their hands had found each other, fingers loosely interlaced. She didn't move. She lay there listening to Sophia breathe, and felt the precise moment her own heart admitted what it had been circling for days. The next afternoon the conference felt different. A brush of shoulders in a crowded elevator lingered half a second too long. A shared glance over bad coffee stretched until one of them looked away first, cheeks warm. They were 2 surgeons orbiting something neither had named yet, gravitational pull increasing with every hour. That evening, Sophia chose a tiny Argentine steakhouse miles from the convention center. Somewhere the badge lanyards came off and they could pretend they were just 2 women escaping a Midwestern November. Over Malbec and chimichurri, Sophia said, I'm taking it. San Francisco. I called this afternoon and accepted. Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The happiness was real. The ache underneath it was sharper than any scalpel she'd ever held. I'm proud of you, she managed. Terrified, but proud. They want me there January 1st, Sophia continued. 6 weeks to close the lab. Sublet my place. Say goodbye to everyone. She paused. I don't know how to say goodbye to you. Elena's laugh came out shaky. We've known each other 5 days. 5 days that feel like 5 years, Sophia said softly. Tell me I'm insane. You're not insane. They paid the bill in silence thick enough to suffocate. Outside, the wind had teeth. Without discussion, Sophia reached for Elena's hand as they crossed Michigan Avenue, fingers threading like it was the most natural thing in the world. Neither let go until they reached the hotel lobby. In the elevator, Elena's pulse hammered so loudly she was sure Sophia could hear it. Their rooms adjoining because the housing chair had assumed 2 female attendings would be fine sharing a door felt both too small and impossibly far apart. Sophia lingered in the open doorway. The heat works now, she said, nodding toward the humming vent. No more excuses about freezing to death together. We could leave the door open anyway, Elena said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Sophia studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her eyes. Then she nodded once and disappeared into her own room. Elena heard the rustle of clothes, the soft thud of shoes hitting carpet, the creak of beds. At 2:17 a.m., Elena gave up pretending to sleep. She padded to the doorway in socks and an oversized Brigham hoodie. Sophia was awake, backlit by her phone, staring at the ceiling. Hi, Elena whispered. Hi, Sophia answered. I'm scared. Of the job. That too. Sophia sat up, knees drawn to her chest. Mostly of this. Of us. Of the fact that in 6 weeks I board a plane and whatever this is might just evaporate, like a dream you can't hold on to after waking up. Elena crossed the threshold without asking permission this time. She sat on the edge of Sophia's bed. It doesn't have to evaporate. Sophia's eyes searched hers in the dim light. We live 3,000 miles apart. We're both married to our work. We met because a conference scheduler put us in adjoining rooms. This is logistically insane. Logistics aren't everything, Elena said. The words felt enormous coming out. Sophia let out a breath that trembled. Come here. Elena went. They met in the middle of the bed. Tentative at first, foreheads touching, then noses brushing, then finally mouths. The kiss was slow, deliberate, like surgeons confirming anatomy before first incision. When they pulled apart, foreheads still resting together, Sophia whispered, state, around a state. They learned the geography of each other by piccolo, and the low hum of the heater collarbones and hip bones. The small scar on Sophia's rib from a childhood bike accident. The way Elena's breath caught when Sophia traced the line of her jaw. There was no rush. The conference ended tomorrow, and the rest of their lives loomed after that. They had only this night to be reckless. Later, tangled in hotel sheets that smelled faintly of bleach and possibility, Sophia murmured against Elena's shoulder, I don't know how to do this part. The leaving, we'll figure it out, Elena said. 6 weeks is long enough to start. Outside, Chicago kept moving, sirens, snow starting to fall, planes descending toward O'Hare. Inside room 1428, 2 women who fixed children's hearts with their hands discovered that sometimes the hardest thing to repair is your own. In the morning they would put lanyards back on and attend closing sessions and pretend to be only colleagues, but the door between their rooms stayed propped open with a shoe, and when they boarded separate flights home Boston for a A final 6 weeks in New York for Sophia. They carried matching marks low on their collarbones, small enough to hide beneath scrubs, large enough to remind them both that distance was only geography. Some innovations, Elena thought, on the runway, watching snow swirl across the tarmac, aren't built in labs. Some happen in adjoining hotel rooms, when two people decide the risk of a broken heart is worth the chance of a whole one. Her name was Leela Kanth, a pediatric oncologist from Karachi who had spent the last 8 years building a ward that families in Lahore and Islamabad flew their children to when everywhere else had given up. His name was Daniel S., 36, a climate data engineer from Seattle, quiet-spoken, the kind of man who could explain rising sea levels in a way that made you feel the water at your ankles. They met in Cape Town, at a week-long global health and climate symposium in late January, when the jacarandas were bleeding purple onto the streets and Table Mountain kept disappearing behind sudden summer rain. It started, absurdly, over ice. Leela's room fridge had died on day 2. The hotel was fully booked and maintenance was coming tomorrow. At 2:47 a.m. she stood in the service corridor in hotel slippers, hair in a lopsided bun, trying to bribe a night porter for a bucket of ice so her insulin pens wouldn't cook. Daniel appeared from the stairwell carrying 2 plastic bags of ice from the bar. He'd sweet-talked the bartender into giving him after closing. He took one look at her and handed her a bag without a word. "Thank you," she said in Urdu first, then caught herself and switched to English. "You're a lifesaver." "Literally, apparently," he answered, and smiled the small, crooked smile that would undo her over the next 6 days. They ended up on the roof of the hotel because neither could sleep. Cape Town glittered below them, the ocean black and breathing. They talked about childhood monsoons and Pacific Northwest drizzle, about losing patience and losing glaciers, about how both their jobs required them to be good at delivering unbearable news calmly. By the 4th night, they weren't pretending anymore. They skipped the gala dinner, bought cheap beer from a corner spaza shop, and sat on the seawall at Mui Point with the lighthouse sweeping over them every 30 seconds. When the wind came up, Daniel took off his jacket and draped it over Leela's shoulders without asking. She let her head rest just for a moment against his upper arm. Neither of them moved away. On the 5th night, in the dim light of her hotel room, she kissed him first. It was careful, almost polite, as if they were both afraid the week would bruise if they pressed too hard. Afterward they lay side by side, fully clothed, listening to the hum of the new fridge the hotel had finally installed. "I leave the day after tomorrow," she said into the dark. "I know," he said. The last full day of the conference they played hooky. They took the ferry to Robben Island, even though both had already been years ago, because neither wanted to waste sunlight on Pal. They held hands on the boat like teenagers. On the return trip the wind whipped her dupatta loose. He caught it before it flew into the Atlantic and wound it gently back around her neck. That night they talked about the impossible math. She was moving to San Francisco in 7 weeks, 6, really to lead a new pediatric hematology program at UCSF. The job was the kind of offer that came once in a career. He lived in Seattle, 3 hours north by car on a good day, 1,100 kilometers of I-5 and heartbreak on a bad one. Different countries, different healthcare systems, different visa categories, different everything. "I'm scared," she admitted, tracing the constellation of freckles across his shoulder, "that this is a bubble, that when real life starts again, patients dying, grant deadlines, 20-hour call shifts, this will feel like a fever dream." Daniel was quiet for a long time. "Then I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of doing the safe thing and spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd tried." They stayed awake until the muezzin in Biokop called 5, a sound that drifted faintly across the city bowl and into their open window. "I want to try it," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "Then we try." The goodbye at the airport was brutal. Cape Town International is small. There's nowhere to hide. They stood at the entrance to International Departures, clutching paper cups of terrible coffee. "I'll call the minute I land in Dubai," she said. "I'll be awake," he promised. The next 7 weeks were the special kind of torture. Leela flew back to Karachi, finished her notice at the hospital, packed up an apartment full of memories, photos of kids who didn't make it, drawings from kids who did. Every night at 11 p.m. PKT, she and Daniel video. Sometimes they cooked the same recipe on opposite sides of the planet. Him making her mother's nihari recipe he'd found online. Her attempting his grandmother's kimchi jjigae and failing spectacularly. They laughed until they cried. And sometimes they just cried. He flew to San Francisco 10 days after she arrived. Used every favor he'd ever earned to get a week off. He landed at SFO carrying a suitcase and a cooler full of Seattle salmon because she'd joked she already missed real fish. She met him at arrivals with a sign that said Dr. SEO, Climate Hero in glitter pen. They kissed in the middle of the crowd like people who had invented longing. They spent the week acting like tourists and like an old married couple all at once. Golden Gate Bridge at sunrise. Dim sum in the sunset. Falling asleep on the Anjuda because jet lag and new love are a lethal combination. On the 3rd night she took Tim to the hospital roof at 3 a.m. during her call shift and showed him the city lights, spread out like circuitry. "This is my new sky," she said. "I want to be in it." He answered. Distance still loomed. He had projects in the Pacific Northwest tied to specific buoys and tide gauges. She had a fellowship program to build. There were visas. There were salaries that didn't stretch to frequent flights. There were parents who didn't understand why their only daughter was crying over an American she'd known for 3 months, but they kept choosing each other in small, deliberate ways. He learned Urdu swear words and how to make perfect doodh potty chai. She learned to identify salmon species and how to pronounce Puget Sound without tripping. They booked tickets back and forth like gamblers doubling down. Seattle for American Thanksgiving, San Francisco for Eid, Karachi for his birthday, because she insisted he had to eat her mother's biryani at least once before deciding whether he could handle forever. The night before her final move from Karachi, when the apartment was empty, except for suitcases and the echo of footsteps, she and Daniel stayed on video call while she sat on the bare floor. Terrified, she said, voice cracking, that I'm uprooting my entire life for something that might not survive reality. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he held up a plane ticket on his screen. Seattle to San Francisco. One way, dated 3 months from now. I quit the field project that was keeping me anchored in Washington, he said. I took the senior data architect job at the Bay Area lab. I start in April. I didn't want to tell you until it was real. She started crying so hard she couldn't speak. I'm still scared, he added softly. But I'm not scared of the distance anymore. I'm only scared of not being where you are. When she finally landed in California for good, he was waiting at baggage claim with a bouquet of jacarandas he'd sweet-talked a supplier into flying up from Los Angeles, because Cape Town had taught them both that some things are worth impossible effort. They still had no idea how everything would work. Immigration lawyers, finding an apartment that could fit 2 intense careers and 1 very confused cat Daniel insisted on adopting, but they walked out of the airport into the foggy San Francisco dusk, holding the purple flowers bright against the gray, and for the first time in months the future felt less like a question mark and more like a road they were already on, together. Alex Harper, 35, was a trauma surgeon in Seattle, the kind of doctor who could keep his hand steady while the world exploded around him. He had grown up in the Pacific Northwest, loved the rain, loved the quiet competence of his city, and had never seriously considered living anywhere else. Liam Chen, 30, was a climate scientist who had spent the last 8 years in Washington, D.C., building models that tried to predict how badly humanity had already screwed itself. He was brilliant, funny in a dry, self-deprecating way, and carried the faint exhaustion of someone who spent his days staring at graphs that only ever trended upward in the worst possible direction. They met, absurdly, because of a hurricane. In late August, Hurricane Morrison barreled up the East Coast and shut down every airport from Miami to Boston. Alex had been in D.C. for a 3-day trauma conference. Liam had been there presenting new findings at an interagency briefing. When the storm hit, every hotel in the city filled instantly with stranded travelers. Alex wound up sharing a 12th-floor junior suite at the DuPont Circle Hotel with a complete stranger who turned out to be Liam. They spent 4 days trapped together. They ordered room service burgers at 2 a.m., argued about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie, took turns sleeping on the fold-out couch, and somewhere between the second and third power outage realized they were no longer pretending to be polite. On the last night, with the city still half dark and the airport still closed, Liam kissed him against the window while thunder rolled overhead. It felt inevitable. It felt terrifying. When the airports finally reopened, they exchanged numbers like people who already knew. They were making a mistake by separating. For the next 6 weeks they texted constantly. They FaceTimed from opposite coasts until one of them fell asleep with a phone propped on a pillow. Alex sent Liam photos of the ferries cutting across Puget Sound at sunset. Liam sent Alex voice notes from the National Mall at dawn, describing the way the light hit the Lincoln Memorial when no one else was around. In October, Liam flew to Seattle for a long weekend. Alex picked him up in the rain. And the moment Liam stepped off the jetway with wet hair and that crooked smile, Alex knew he was gone. They spent 3 days barely leaving Alex's Capitol Hill apartment. They cooked pasta, argued about music. Liam insisted Radiohead was overrated. Alex threatened to make him walk home to D.C., and made love like people who were trying to compress months of missing each other into 72 hours. When Liam's flight left on Monday morning, they stood at the gate holding hands until the final boarding call. Neither of them cried in public, but Alex sat in his car in short-term parking for 20 minutes afterward, trying to breathe around the sudden hollow space in his chest. They tried to make long-distance work. They really did. They scheduled video dates on Thursday nights and Sunday mornings. They sent each other playlists and stupid memes and long, vulnerable emails at 3 a.m. when one of them couldn't sleep. Liam flew out for Thanksgiving. Alex flew east for New Year's Eve. They met halfway in Chicago once, just for 36 hours, because it was the only weekend either of them had free, but the distance was a slow-acting poison. There were nights when Alex came off a shift covered in someone else's blood and all he wanted was to crawl into bed with Liam and be held. And instead he had to settle for a pixelated face on a screen that buffered every 7 seconds. There were weeks when Liam was buried in grant deadlines and couldn't talk for days. and Alex lay awake wondering if the silence meant something had shifted. In February, Liam got offered the lead position on a new international climate initiative based in Geneva. 2-year contract. Renewable, the kind of job people in his field killed for. He called Alex the night he got the formal offer. "I haven't said yes," Liam said before Alex could speak. "I'm not going to say yes unless we figure this out together." Alex closed his eyes. He could hear the rain hitting the windows of his apartment, steady and familiar, the sound of the life he'd always assumed he would live. "Liam," he said quietly, "you have to take it." "No, I don't. Not if it means losing you." "You won't lose me," Alex lied. "We'll make it work." They both knew he was lying. Liam turned the job down. 3 weeks later, Alex got a call at 4 a.m. from the chief of surgery at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. They had an attending trauma position opening up unexpectedly. It was a step up, not lateral. Better funding, better research opportunities. A trauma center that saw twice the volume of Seattle's. The chief had trained under Alex's mentor years ago and had followed his career. Baltimore was 2 hours from D.C. by train. Alex sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and stared at the wall. For a long time he called Liam the next morning. "I'm moving," he said without preamble. "I got into I'm giving notice here. I'll be there in 10 weeks. On the other end of the line, Liam made a sound like he'd been holding his breath for 6 months and someone had finally punched him in the chest. "You sure?" Liam asked, voice cracking. "Alex, this is your home, your people. Your whole life is there." "My whole life," Alex said, is apparently a data nerd who thinks Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie. "I'm sure." The logistics were brutal. Alex sold the condo he'd bought when he was 30, the one with a view of Elliott Bay he'd always loved. He said goodbye to nurses who had become family, to residents who cried when he told them, to the attending who had mentored him since internship and hugged him hard enough to crack a rib. He packed his life into boxes and flew east with 2 suitcases and a carry-on full of apprehension. Liam met him outside baggage claim at BWI with a sign that said, "Dr. Harper will argue about Christmas movies for food." Alex laughed so hard he almost dropped his bag. They rented an old row house in Federal Hill, the kind with creaking floors and a fireplace that actually worked. For the first month they kept stepping around each other like they were afraid the whole thing was a dream that might vanish if they moved confidently. There were fights, of course. Alex hated the humidity. Liam worked impossible hours and forgot to buy groceries. Alex left bloodied scrubs in the laundry room and Liam passive-aggressively started doing all the laundry. At 2 a.m. they learned that living together was different from missing each other across 3,000 miles. But there were also mornings when Alex woke up to the smell of coffee and Liam humming off-key in the kitchen while making pancakes. There were nights when Alex came home shattered after losing a kid on the table and Liam simply held him on the couch without trying to fix it. There were quiet Sundays reading the paper in bed while rain tapped the windows, Liam's head on Alex's chest, their legs tangled under an ancient quilt. 18 months after Alex moved east, on a clear October evening, Liam took him back to the Lincoln Memorial at twilight. The tourists were thinning out. The reflecting pool caught the last of the light. Liam stopped at the top of the steps and turned to him. "I turned down Geneva for you," he said quietly. "And then you left your whole life behind and moved here for me. We've spent almost 2 years making sure the other one never has to choose between love and everything else." He pulled a ring from his pocket, white gold, brushed finish, simple and perfect. "I don't want either of us to have to choose ever again," Liam said. "Alexander Harper, will you marry me?" Alex couldn't speak for a long second. He managed a nod, then a whispered yes, then pulled Liam into a kiss that tasted like salt and relief and the rest of their lives. Behind them, the marble Lincoln gazed out over the city, impassive and ancient. Wild wool men who had crossed a continent for each other promised to stay exactly where they were, together. The heat in Austin that summer was criminal. It pressed against the windows of their third-floor apartment like it had a personal grudge. The air conditioner had coughed its last breath sometime around midnight, leaving only the lazy spin of a ceiling fan that moved the thick air around without cooling anything. Liam was sprawled on the couch in nothing but boxer briefs, one arm flung over his eyes. Noah stood at the kitchen counter in an old Rice University t-shirt, eating ice cubes straight from the tray because the freezer was the only thing still working. "This is how we die," Liam muttered. "Death by humidity. They'll find us mummified in our own sweat." Noah crunched another cube. "We're not dying. We're going on an ice pilgrimage." He grabbed the big red cooler from the top of the fridge, the one they'd bought for camping trips they never took. "HB on South Congress is 24 hours. Come on." It was 3:17 a.m. when they walked out into the orange glow of the streetlights, barefoot because shoes felt like torture, carrying the cooler between them like a sacred relic. The asphalt still radiated heat from the day. Somewhere down the block, a bar had just closed and people were laughing too loud, the sound echoing off the old houses. Noah's hand brushed Liam's as they walked. Neither of them said anything about it, but neither pulled away. They bought 40 pounds of ice and 2 cherry ices just because they could. On the walk back, Noah tipped his head back and poured half his icy over his face, red syrup running down his neck like blood from a cartoon murder. Liam laughed so hard he nearly dropped his end of the cooler. That was the night. Noah decided he was going to ask Liam to marry him, not because of the heat or the ice or the ridiculousness of it all, though those things helped, but because in that moment, carrying a cooler full of melting ice through a sleeping city, he looked at Liam, hair sticking up, red sugar on his chin, barefoot and ridiculous and perfect, and knew there would never be anyone else he wanted to be this stupid with. They'd met 6 years earlier in New Orleans, both in town for a library conference neither of them cared about. Liam was presenting a paper on digital preservation that everyone pretended to understand. Noah was supposed to be manning a vendor booth for a startup that folded 3 months later. Instead, they ditched the conference on the second day and spent the week wandering the quarter, eating beignets at 2 a.m., listening to brass bands on Frenchman Street, kissing for the first time on a bench by the river while a steamboat went past blasting When the Saints Go Marching In. When the conference ended, Liam flew back to Houston and Noah to Seattle. They promised to text. They did. Then they promised to visit. They did that too. Then came the 6 weeks that almost broke them. Noah's mother got sick. Liam's job turned toxic. The distance felt impossible. There were nights neither of them slept, just staring at their phones waiting for the other to say it wasn't working. But they didn't say that. Instead, Noah quit his job. Liam gave notice. They met halfway in Austin because neither wanted to live in the other city, and both of them hated snow. They found the apartment with the broken air conditioning and the loud neighbors and the cracked tile in the bathroom, and they moved in together with 2 suitcases and a lot of hope. 8 months after the ice run, on a cool October evening that finally felt like forgiveness, Noah took Liam back to New Orleans. They stayed in the same little hotel in the Morrison. On their last night, they walked to the river again. The same bench was still there, older now, paint peeling. Noah had the ring in his pocket for 3 days, waiting for the moment that felt right. It never felt right. It felt terrifying. He sat down hard on the bench and stared at the water. Liam sat next to him, quiet. After a long time, Noah said, voice cracking, "I'm scared." "Of what?" Liam asked softly. "That you'll say no. That you'll say yes and then 5 years from now we'll hate each other. That I'm not enough. That I'm too much. That we're idiots for thinking this can work." Liam was quiet for so long, Noah started to panic. Then Liam reached over and took the ring box out of Noah's pocket himself, opened it, and looked at the simple platinum band inside. "You want to marry me?" Liam asked. More than anything, Liam slipped the ring on his own finger, then turned and kissed Noah so hard they almost fell off the bench. "Yes," he said against Noah's mouth. Obviously yes. They called their families from the hotel room at 4 a.m. Central Time, which meant it was an ungodly hour on both coasts. Noah's mum cried so hard she had to put the phone down. Liam's dad asked immediately if they were registered at Ray. Their siblings sent a barrage of heart emojis and inappropriate memes. By noon, both mothers were texting venue ideas and asking about colors that night. Back in Austin, they lay in bed with the windows open because the air conditioning still wasn't fixed and neither of them cared anymore. "We're not doing the big thing," Liam said. "No ballroom, no string quartet, no chicken or fish option, thank God." Noah sighed. "I want 25 people max. I want it outside. I want it to feel like us." They found the perfect spot 6 months later. A wildflower farm just west of Dripping Springs. The kind of place where the bluebonnets came in thick enough to lie down in and disappear. The owner let them rent the entire backfield for a weekend. They set the date for the first Saturday in April when the flowers would be at their peak, the night before the wedding. They stayed in separate cabins because their friends insisted on tradition. Noah couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the vows he'd written and rewritten 17 times. At 2 a.m. he gave up, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, and walked across the dark field to Liam's cabin. Liam was sitting on the porch steps, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. "Couldn't sleep either?" Noah asked. "No." Liam scooted over to make room. They sat shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the moonlit bluebonnets that stretched all the way to the tree line. "I'm nervous," Liam admitted after a while. "About tomorrow. About 40 years from tomorrow. About getting old and annoying. About health insurance, and whether we'll fight about the thermostat. About whether we're promising something we don't know how to keep." Noah leaned his head against Liam's. "We're definitely going to fight about the thermostat, and money, and whose turn it is to take out the trash. And we're going to disappoint each other sometimes. But we're also going to keep choosing this. Every day. Even the bad ones." Liam turned to look at him. "You promise?" "I promise." They kissed there on the cabin steps, slow and familiar and new all at once. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The bluebonnets swayed in the breeze like they were listening. The next day was perfect in the way only slightly imperfect days can be. The flowers were thick and fragrant. Their dog, a rescue mutt named Beignade, wore a bow tie and tried to eat it. Liam's niece dropped the ring pillow in the dirt and burst into tears. Noah's dad told an embarrassingly long story during the toasts about the time Noah tried to propose to his high school girlfriend with a ring pop. Everyone cried anyway. When it came time for vows, Noah went first. Liam said, voice shaking just a little. 6 years ago I met you in a city that smells like river and beignets and possibility. I didn't know then that you would become my favorite place. But you are. You are my French Quarter at 3 a.m. You are my ice run in barefoot desperation. You are every quiet moment and every loud one. I will keep choosing you on the days when it's easy, and I will choose you twice as hard on the days when it's not. I love you more than which, let's be honest, is a lot. Liam laughed through his tears. Noah, he said, you are the person I want to carry coolers with at 3 in the morning for the rest of my life. You are the only one I want to disappoint and be disappointed by. Because even our worst days are better than my best days before you. I love you in every version of the future, even the ones we haven't imagined yet. Especially those they kissed while their friends whooped and beignet barked and the bluebonnets waved like they were applauding later. After the cake lemon with blackberry filling, because of course, and the dancing mostly swaying badly to records on a portable speaker, they walked out into the field alone. The sun was setting, turning everything golden purple. Liam took Noah's hand. We did it, he said quietly. We really did. They stood there until the stars came out. Two people in rumpled suits surrounded by a sea of flowers, holding on to the beginning of everything they'd promised each other, and somewhere, far away in Austin, their apartment air conditioning finally got fixed they didn't notice for weeks.